Lake Forest Podcast is supported by viewers, listeners, and businesses just like you. Looking for the best pool supplies? Look no further than Dohany's Pool Supplies. With a history dating back to 1967, this family-owned business offers everything families need to keep their pools clean and sparkling, from chemicals to equipment. Plus, customers enjoy free shipping on all orders. Visit Dohany's Pool Supplies today at doheny.com, DOHENY.com, to learn more. Forest Bluff Real Estate Team serves Illinois, Wisconsin, Lake Forest, and Lake Bluff. John Josephitis, Laura Lee Van Fleet, and of course Michelle Parnell. Get a free market analysis now at forestbluffrealestate.com. For the best cannabis in the world, look no further than Iliad Epic Grow. Owned by Lake Bluff's own Rich Ruzich, they are a cannabis cultivation center focusing on hard-to-find small batch products that will delight both the occasional user and ganjier. When visiting Michigan, ask for it by name. Epic Products, exceptional process. For more information, email info@iliadgrow.com. Havey Communications has been helping first responders arrive safely since 1983. It's owned by Lake Forest's own Mike Havey. Check them out at haveycommunications.com. Are you looking for beer, wings, and swings in Lake Forest? Well, check out Duffer's Pub and their state-of-the-art golf simulators. This primo setup is the perfect place for your next corporate event. Yes, let your boss win. And of course, all the games will be on the TV and you'll never go hungry because the za and wings are scrumptious. Go to Duffer's Pub on Western Avenue now. We'd also like to say we're thankful for our Patreon supporters, Otto, John C., Helen, and Herrick.
So what happened? I noticed it's down. Are we talking about it on the show or no?
Yeah, we're talking about it on the show.
You took the post? You took the Facebook post?
Yeah, I did. I did take it down.
What happened after?
Chicago people, football people, our old school people. Somebody says, hey man, can you do me a salad? Okay, I'll do you a salad. But it doesn't mean that I can't talk about it.
What salad are you going to do me?
What?
I need a salad. What salad do you want to do?
I hope our guests
come. I guess we're joining late, okay?
Put your hands on the desk.
It's usually, I'm the one that's usually late here, so.
I know. It's
I'm here all week, trying to deal.
You can ask me about the post that I put up and took down, homeless sleeping at Bank of America, me attacking liberals. Speaking of liberals, Severino's a liberal. Rob Metz is a liberal.
I don't know Rob Metz, so I can't talk about him. I really don't.
Yeah,
you do. I don't.
Let's leave that.
I believe Rob was at Mary Cole's fundraiser. Somebody said he was. I know, Rick, you couldn't make it because
I couldn't make it. Yeah, I got
your wife was under the weather.
COVID, which is still interrupting with my freaking life. I got to tell you, I've had it with COVID. I had to miss my 50th high school reunion on Saturday night because my wife had COVID. I didn't have COVID, by the way. I was negative every time, but it's like is
it the protocol? You still gotta.
Yeah, one of my former classmates. Glad to be former.
Then you should have went.
Well, no. See, if I go and somebody gets
drinking out of his glass,
plus people, somebody comes down with COVID afterwards, I'm going to get blamed for it.
The CDC tracks you down.
Yeah, exactly.
Your iPhone is watching
Burks
you.
Is going to fling your scarf at me. I would certainly be banned for life.
Lake Forest podcast host causes COVID outbreak.
Yeah. Yes, super spread.
Didn't you go to Highland Park High School?
Yeah, Highland Park High School. Right.
Was the reunion in Highland Park?
Yeah, it was. Yes.
See, so you would have caught Lake Forest. So there you go. Lake Forest podcast host spreads COVID in Highland Park.
Yeah, there you go.
Liberals would have a field day with
that'd be good.
Did you have to go through a metal detector?
Just to go through a COVID. They all had to take a little test before they went into the reunion.
They'll put all their homeless on a little mini bus, one of the small buses, and ship them.
Don't get me started on the homeless. Don't get me going. I got somebody stewing up on our page now.
Oh, good. There we go. Hey, we got a guest.
Here he is. Now you just got to get his video going.
He's missing one of his names. I thought he had 3 names.
I do.
Well,
I do. There you go.
Hey, John.
Want to buy an extra name?
So should we call you on the show John Eric or John?
Yeah, you can call me either. Like I told you, Joe, been called a lot worse. So either one's fine.
All right, we'll go with John, I think.
Perfect.
So who knows this?
I can remember that
one. What? Why is this ex-copper on my lawn?
Yeah, I don't blame you. I'd call the cops if I were you, but
they can't do anything.
They won't do
can't
anything.
do
Now you can live there.
Their
You
hands
can
are
camp out
tied.
there, get a tent. Maybe
The
like
ACLU and the Illinois General Assembly would stop them.
Oh.
You get a lot of Facebook posts though. Joe, Rick, how do we know this fine young man?
So, John, I met John last week at our friend Mary Cole's fundraiser at Mickey Finn's out in Libertyville. Turns out we have some mutual friends, and certainly Mary is now our mutual friend, and we're all excited about her campaign for state's attorney. But talking with John, he is a retired police officer from Lincolnshire, just down the street here from not far from Lake Forest. And I know we've been wanting to get a perspective of law enforcement on the show, and obviously active duty police officers are limited in what they can do and say, though we do talk to a lot of them off the record. But John, you're retired. So tell us a little bit about yourself, your history with the police and everything.
So, I spent 25 years with the Lincolnshire Police Department. Started in patrol, obviously. Then I became the SRO at Stevenson High School. I did that for 4 years. Then there was an opening in investigations, which that was my dream for law enforcement. I always wanted to be a detective.
John, sorry to interrupt you. What's an SRO? Standing room
school resource officer. Sorry. Yeah. And so that position opened up, and I got that, and then I applied for a couple of years later and became a member of the Lake County Major Crime Task Force. I spent 10 years on that, which is essentially the homicide task force for the county. I rose to the rank of assistant commander with the task force. During my tenure at Lincolnshire, I became a sergeant. And eventually, when I retired, I was a sergeant in charge of investigations and the school resource officers at Stevenson. I also spent some time when I was investigations assigned to the FBI Identity Theft Task Force out of Chicago, which was a really cool assignment because I got to travel all over the country arresting bad guys. So that was a lot of fun for a small town cop. I got to tell you, I really enjoyed that part of it. But I was very lucky in my career, had a lot of varied experiences. Obviously, working in Lincolnshire, I did a lot of white collar crime, so to speak. But during the course of my investigative career, I worked very closely with the state's attorney's office, and I got to know both Mike Waller and Mike Nierheim. I worked with Mike when he was a line state's attorney in felony review, taking my cases up in front of him, trying to get approval for charges and stuff. So I knew Mike long before he ran for and became state's attorney, and then subsequently worked very closely with him and his office. And thoroughly enjoyed my interactions with him up there. But that's my background in law enforcement. And I retired in December of 2021 after almost 26 years in the business. So
you retired a year after Eric Rinehart became the Lake County State's Attorney. What was that year like?
Yes, I did. Clearly, it was different. We the mandates, I would say, were different. Some of the procedures changed a bit, and I think that one thing that I remember about Mike, regardless of which side of the political fence you fell on, I didn't see any politics in his office. None of the decisions that I saw that I were personally involved with. And again, remember, I was also a member of the task force at that time too. So we dealt a lot with his office, clearly with those cases. The other thing, we handled with the task force, and at the time we were a little bit unique. We handle all the officer involved shootings in Lake County. Those were investigated by us. and not the state police. And so I thought Mike's office was very, very efficient in handling officer involved shootings. I think what people forget is that these guys, there's a huge impact on their lives, these officers. And when things drag on, so to speak, and decisions aren't made, these folks are just left in limbo a lot. So I thought Mike did really well. So there were some changes there. I was no longer on the task force when Eric took over in the state's attorney's office. I was still with Lincolnshire. And I know that there was a mass exodus of staff members, high-level staff members, some of which was typical when a new boss comes into town. They hire their own staff, but there were a lot of line state's attorneys that left as well. So,
John, you still keep in touch with a lot of your former coworkers, right? I mean, you talk to a lot of your they're not just your coworkers, they're your friends. I mean, I've never seen a stronger bond in a profession than police officers, and understandably so. So what are you hearing out there? Because I think a lot of people, this kind of came up last spring with the Lake Forest mayoral election, and one of the candidates who chose to support both Eric Rinehart and Kim Fox down in Cook County gave both of them a lot of money. And the whole issue of public safety is coming up, and everybody's talking about the quote unquote Safety Act, which a lot of us feel is a poorly named act because it does anything but safety. But give us your take on that and what you're hearing from your coworkers.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of trepidation with this. There's a lot of the major focus, especially from the media, has been about the no cash bail. That's sort of been, where everything has trended with that. But there's a lot of things there's a few other items in that law that were left in that directly impacts law enforcement. It allows for completely anonymous complaints against police officers, and that have to be investigated. So, but the big kicker to that is that even when these complaints are unfounded or the officer is exonerated, they remain in your permanent file, so forever. Which you can understand, that opens you up to a lot of exposure, and just your sort of interactions on a daily basis sometimes with folks. It can open you up for things such as on a simple traffic stop where somebody just didn't like the fact that they got caught or whatever the case might be, and all they got to do is drop a dime. They don't have to leave their real name. They don't have to give you any other information other than my information, and then the department is required to launch an investigation as if it were a formal complaint, and even if it's unfounded, that's going to stay in my file for the rest of my career. And when you wonder why people don't want to get into this, when your every move is scrutinized on every basis, and even for just doing your job, and people are allowed to sort of, without any other basis other than just a phone call, impact your career, I think that's a huge thing, and nobody really talks about that, and I think that's an important point. But that's always on the mind of an officer, and I'll be the first to tell you that if there are legitimate complaints, we do want those to come forward. We do want to investigate those, but it's unfair on the other end when people are either exonerated or it's unfounded, that it just remains in their record.
I have to agree. That's very draconian. If I'm a police officer and I'm thinking, boy, I could stop this car or I could not stop this car, I'm kind of leaning towards not stopping the car, because if I don't stop the car, then I can't get reported.
Yeah.
If I do nothing, if I just stand there, I'm in I'm more protected. Now, John, I'm an attorney, and we have a disciplinary commission as well, the ARDC, the Attorney Registration Disciplinary Commission, and anybody can make a complaint against me as well. But the commission does investigate those, and if they are found not to be any basis for it, it is dismissed. And no, it is not a part of a permanent record, and it is not something that is on the ARDC's website or otherwise. You have to actually be adjudicated by the ARDC to have committed some ethical violation before something goes on as a permanent feature. I can see why that would having anybody being able to make an anonymous, that's terrible, charge against the police officer, and it stays on their record for the rest of their career. That's a terrible thing.
So Eric Rinehart's profession, which is your profession, Rick, being an attorney, is held to a different standard than our police officers are held to, is what you just said.
Yes, that is certainly true.
John,
that's crazy.
John, how have the cameras changed things?
Well, I've always been a big proponent of the cameras. It was interesting. So when the impetus, a lot of this started with interrogations, right? So in our early homicide cases, when I first started task force, those interviews were not videoed, and they were not required by statute at the time to be. But as a task force, we took it upon ourselves to do that on our own before it became mandatory for under the law. I always thought, and then when you apply that to body cameras, look, the vast majority of the police do their job, and they do it well, and they do the best that they can. So I think it's a great tool for law enforcement. I can tell you in agencies that have had body cameras, when they're introduced, the level of formal complaints goes way down. It's simply a matter of replaying the video. I will tell you, the other thing that's very interesting to see is when you respond to scenes and you let people know they're being recorded, a lot of times you can see a change in behavior right off the bat, because people know everything they say and everything they do is going to be recorded and kept. So
I imagine that probably calms things down in some circumstances.
It absolutely does. Yes, no question about that.
So why doesn't everybody do it? I know once they first get introduced, I talked to some of my Chicago copper buddies. Oh, the camera malfunctioned. You get all that crap for the first year of it, and then you got to use it. Like, why wouldn't, if you're a good cop, and I assume they're all good coppers, love the boys in blue, all right?
And the girls in blue.
Yes.
Boys, girls, gals, he, she, they, whatever.
Love them all.
Regardless of gender.
Can we say all? All right. So you have the camera, and it puts everybody, on a level playing field. Either it happened or it didn't happen. So is it the unions that don't want it, or is it the cost? Because I think the cost would be offset by the lawsuits. John, what do you think?
Actually, John, one other thing I heard about the new law is that it requires that each individual police officer have their own video camera, their own chest cam, and you can't swap them out. For example, your shift ends, you hand it to the next guy.
Correct. That is correct. But like anything, like a lot of things in Illinois, these are unfunded mandates, right? So if you think about requiring every police department, in Lake County, we have 37 separate police departments, okay? So the average size of those police departments is about 14 officers. So when you think about that, and you think about the annual budget of some of these agencies, so it's not just the outlay and the purchase of the cameras, right? So sometimes there's state grants available, there's federal grants. You have to maintain that system. And so the cost of storage is enormous, because the statute requires you to keep certain events that are marked or flagged for at least 2 years, right? Because that's the statute of limitations often for federal lawsuits. So you have to keep those in storage, readily accessible, ready to go at a moment's notice for at least 2 years. So again, the cost of the camera is not what does it. It's maintaining them, and then it's the storage that's required.
Hold on, John. Yeah. I know you're the guest, but look, this is 2 terabytes, okay? Yeah. There's your 2 years of storage right there, $99, okay?
Yeah, but unfortunately, your 2 terabyte, I also have to make it secured. I can't, I have to house that. And so that means that I have to follow federal guidelines that it can't be, that makes it almost hack proof. that it's only accessible by certain people.
So for 2 terabytes online is $20 a month. Where I'm going with it, I'm just doing some back of the envelope math here with Rick here. You have all these bullcrap lawsuits out there.
Yep. I
would think that the cost to maintain this system, whatever it is, the cloud, in your hand or whatever, would offset it. Are there a lot of fraud, bullcrap lawsuits out there, John, against coppers?
Of course, but here's the other cost factor. There are agencies that have to hire full-time FOIA people because of the amount of requests that come in for body cam videos.
Yeah, you get a lot of crazy FOIA requests.
Yeah, and so now what you're dealing with is literally hiring personnel and staff and somebody who has to respond to these requests. And again, if FOIA in Illinois is probably one of the most liberal FOIAs that you have on the books. And
you're telling me
you can make
the king of the FOIA.
Yeah.
John, has anybody done the math on this? Because, okay, great, you hire a couple more admins, and now with artificial intelligence, it's just you're doing a Google search through your records, right?
I don't think a lot of these towns have artificial intelligence. Most of these towns don't have natural intelligence, much less artificial intelligence.
No, but would this be I'm going to guess that, though, since this is the Lake Forest podcast, I'm going to guess that Lake Forest has the resources to do this and is doing it the right way. Just going out on a limb here, but you know a lot of these Lake Forest cops. You worked with them with the Major Crimes Task Force. I mean, I think you got a pretty good. I think Lake Forest is a pretty well-respected department in the county, and So So if someone gets pulled over today on Deer Path for speeding.
Correct.
That body cam video is stored for 2 years.
So if it's what do we call a flagged event? So let's say that traffic stop might have led to criminal charges, outside of the stop, or maybe there was a complaint filed by the motorist. That's what's called a flagged event, and then that has to be held in storage. Most departments are going to do that regardless. On almost every event, because you got to think about, like, I don't know when because you could come back, 1 year and 364 days later with your suit, right? So all of these departments are going to do that. But just to get back to another point that you made, I mean, when you're talking some of these small agencies that might, and again, we're talking up here in Lake County where we do have some really small agencies with only 6-7 officers. You may not even have an admin person, and now you get flooded with FOIA requests that you have to honor. And video transcription is, while there's a lot of good software out there now, that's also an expense, but it's also time consuming, because you got to remember, you got to redact a lot of folks that if you're in a scene somewhere out on the street and you got people who have nothing to do with that scene, you got to block out their faces. You got to do a lot of stuff to make sure that their privacy is ensured. So there's a lot that goes into it. But and again, a lot of these smaller agencies, surely the Lake Forest, the Lincolnshires of the world, they can do it. They've got the funds, they have the capacity to do it. It's when you put it
on about Highwood. Think about Highwood. Think about the number of incidents.
Well, I'm thinking about Knollwood.
The size of the Highwood Police Department. Yeah.
I'm thinking about Knollwood. Yeah. Our neighbors.
Well, Knollwood has no police department. They're part of the
Lake County Sheriff.
Yeah.
Right. Or if they send the Lake Bluff PD.
Yeah, which is the Lake County Sheriff is its own separate universe.
Right. All right,
well,
John,
let's get back.
I'll lay off the cameras, Joe, John, Rick. All right, but let's get down to data. Okay, because police can't do anything without data. Going back to when Giuliani cleaned up New York City, he put a nice system in to measure where the crime's happening. If people don't report crime, then there's not much that you guys can do about it. For instance, we're all up in arms with these electric scooters, and somebody hasn't died yet, so we haven't had a Pearl Harbor event yet for people to take it seriously. So if you almost get hit by a scooter and you don't report that, then that just lets the next person go by and get the potential to get hit. The police can't do anything about it. Can you talk to that? Citizens need to report what's going on in order so you guys have some data to work off of?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, this is always a partnership. Wherever you are policing, because whether you're in Lake Forest or you're in Chicago or New York, I mean, the job is the same, to be honest. So what you do for the most part, day in and day out in policing, is pretty much the same wherever you are in the country. But that does rely many, many times, like you said, on the citizenry to let us know when there are things amiss. And to your point, like for this example, I mean, without us knowing, because he can't be everywhere. There's that rare time when the police might have seen what you're just describing and they can intervene. But outside of that, if you're not letting us know what the issues are in your town, it's hard for us to not only react, but then to come up with plans to hopefully prevent that in the future. And you're right, it is data driven, because I can't just make general statements that scooters are unsafe. I need to have examples, like you're saying, exactly why is it unsafe, and where statistically. We do this great with traffic, right? We do traffic studies all the time, because most towns, that's your number one complaint from the citizenry: speeding or reckless driving. And so, boy, oh boy, we got that down to a science in law enforcement. I'm telling you, we can tell you how many cars came through an intersection. We could recite the number of tickets that were issued there and stuff. But it's these other things, like you were talking about, that we really need the input from the citizens to get us to help that and resolve that issue.
One of the key changes with the Safety Act is bail. Bail is gone now. It's no longer called bond court. We're not going to call it pretrial release court.
Yes.
Yeah, that'll go a long way. Yeah. But now there are a huge number of crimes for which the accused will not be retained or required to post anything other than their own signature, promising that they will show up for trial. I'm going to guess that some people may decide, well, gee, do I really want to go to trial where I'm going to lose and go to jail? Or maybe I'll just miss that today. Do you have any thoughts on that? How well this is going to work?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you from a law enforcement perspective, obviously our number one goal is public safety. It's very difficult, especially in certain cases, when you're talking like, batteries, domestic batteries, issues where, there is legitimate concern for your safety, not only in that moment, but now somebody getting out literally almost immediately, and then being right back to that same situation where they were, and maybe causing further harm without so much as really a thought. I mean, you got to think, if the state's attorney, and I know they're going to prioritize some of these cases, but again, there can be potentially some violence here. And then how much personnel can they devote to seriously trying to come through a pretrial where they're going to say this person should be held? You're talking, with domestic violence alone, you're talking thousands of cases just in Lake County, and you can't devote enough personnel to that. The other thing, though, that I think that the residual effect is going to be is that if and when things start to go south, right, who are they going to pin the blame on? It's going to be pinned on judges, because they're going to put it all back on the judiciary, saying, well, you know what? Why didn't Judge so-and-so hold this guy? Look at it. I mean,
yes,
it's not our fault. Don't blame the prosecutors. And I'm not sure that that's where we want to be going with this either.
As I understand, the prosecutor is going to have a burden of clear and convincing evidence, which is a high burden, in order to have somebody held prior to trial.
Yeah.
Which is going to be.
We've talked about this before, that there's 102 counties in Illinois, and 100 of those 102 counties' state's attorneys, both Republicans and Democrats, so we don't think it's a partisan issue,
right,
have said this is a bad piece of legislation. This is going to lead to an increase in crime. The Will County State's Attorney is a Democrat. He has been very vocal against the so-called Safety Act. I think Mary Cole calls it the Catch and Release Act.
Yes,
yeah,
right.
It's going to put dangerous people on the street. And unfortunately, those two state's attorneys are the Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx and the Lake County State's Attorney, Eric Rinehart. So, and Mr. Rinehart is up for re-election next year, and Mary Cole is probably going to be his opponent. And I think there's a clear difference between those two when it comes to public safety.
I noticed
when
some
people
of
are voting
there are particular crimes where you are still allowed to hold people. First degree murder, second degree murder, treason. But Donald Trump got out on bail.
Let's Georgia. But seriously, I think the concern is, look, a murderer is going to stay in jail, right? I think the concern, though, is that you see instances even now, before the Safety Act kicks in, where Rinehart has let people out for crimes that previous state's attorneys would have kept them in jail. And then they go on to commit a worse crime while they're out, when they're not in jail. So the carjacking in Libertyville, I think, was a great example of some of those guys should have been in jail for previous stuff. And
when does this go into effect, guys? When does the Safety Act go into effect?
September 18.
Okay, so September 18.
Weird date.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's be a little precise here. Okay. In other words, 5 days from our taping here today.
I'm asking everybody. Okay, great. It happens the 18th. How do we know it's a bad idea other than our feelings?
Well, because a lot of police officers and prosecutors have told us
what data points are we going to look at? Shoplifting shoplifting is horrible.
Shoplifting that's already out of
disgusting. Or like, what are we going to look at? What are the data points that say, holy crap, look at this? I'm guessing the jail population will go down, and these little petty crimes will come up. We won't report them because we don't want to deal with the hassle. That means the prices of goods will go up. Inflation will go up even more. John, what do you think is going to happen at September 18th? What data should we be looking at?
One thing I'll tell you from a legal perspective is you're going to have a lot of petitions filed for people that are currently incarcerated to want to gain their freedom. So you're going to get one of that. That's going to be a big overload. And Pete, to your point, I mean, it's going to start emptying the jails. A lot of people sitting there on pretrial right now, they're going to be walking out the door. And, again, obviously our system is predicated on you're innocent until proven guilty. I get that. But the fact is that there's going to be a lot of those people who are, committed crimes that are going to be walking out the door into your communities, into my community. And there's really not a lot of accountability. And to your point, I mean, there's been a lot of studies, hey, should you arrest the guy for the petty crime so he doesn't get to the bigger crime? And I think that it does have an impact because the vast majority of these crimes are committed by such a small percentage of the population that it's been proven that if you can get them off and get them away, right? Yeah, but if you could get
the
them
broken
away,
window theory.
Yeah, but it works, and
there's a lot of truth to it.
That's why
graffiti is a problem.
A lot of communities like by us, absolutely. That's a philosophy that we followed for almost my whole career in Lincolnshire and similar communities to that, and that's why people, I believe, feel safe.
Very successfully, Lincolnshire, for example, does not have a bad crime problem. Yeah,
right, and neither would Lake Forest for a lot of the same reasons. Absolutely.
Although we're now struggling with beggars and homeless people in Lake Forest.
That was going to be my next topic here.
And we are hearing about shoplifting too. So
I don't know if Lincolnshire has a homeless problem. I don't know where in Lincolnshire the homeless would hang out. I don't know.
Lincolnshire's mayor, I don't think would allow it.
Okay. Well, I don't think Mayor Tack wants to allow it either, but I think Mayor Tack's hands are tied somewhat here.
Yeah, I don't.
John,
somebody needs to step up.
Let's talk about this. I mean, I don't know what your experience was dealing with homeless guys out on the street and stuff, and how you would have handled it as a police officer, because we're seeing here in Lake Forest in our downtown area a number of homeless people in somewhat prominent places. The train station, there's a public corner near a popular coffee shop, Hometown Coffee, where a guy has a whole tent set up. Pete there's been a photo the last couple of days on our Facebook page of a guy sleeping by the Bank of America drive-through
Also,
downtown.
Hometown must be attracting them. That's obviously true because the homeless on both sides.
Well, local business brings everyone in, I guess. But
Yeah,
but John, what's your thoughts on this as a law enforcement officer?
Yeah, law enforcement's been kind of put in a tough spot, and Joe and you and I talked a little bit off air about this, but I know Lincolnshire and I looked, in Lake Forest had similar ordinances when it came to loitering. There was even a statute we had at the time for vagrancy, which that's been tossed out years ago. But the loitering statute was around for a while. But the courts have been consistently ruling against that, especially in public places, sidewalks, even the streets, which is why folks are allowed to kind of, you see them with the signs and they wander out into traffic and they're looking for donations, quote unquote. But it's hard on the police because number one, when the ordinances get tossed out, what are you basing your stopping and detaining these folks on? And so you got to walk a fine line. We've taken some creative approaches with some of it. I mean, we had a homeless encampment in one of our wooded areas, which was an encampment. And but there are some zoning laws which don't allow you to set up a residence in some of those areas. So but it's not a criminal offense, but it was a business offense, so to speak. So sometimes we've gone that route, but that's not necessarily a law enforcement matter, but we've worked with other agencies within our village to try to address that issue. And that was more from a safety perspective, obviously, where they were set up and that kind of stuff. But it's really difficult on law enforcement to do that because, again, we can only act upon what the laws are. We can't venture outside. That's when we get in trouble, when we start going outside of the realm of what we can act within. And so,
can I bring up license plate readers?
Sure.
Did you guys use those?
We were in the process when I retired of researching and purchasing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Same principle, right? Car comes into your community, it looks it up in the database, and it gives you an idea who's coming in.
Right.
We are a 2 train station town. Wouldn't it make sense to have a camera just on the train stations to see who's getting let off? And then rotate the cops through at the schedule.
Each train does have multiple doors, and they don't all stop in the same place at the same, in a uniform manner. You would need, like the West train station, you would need at least 5 cameras.
Oh,
and then you would need an infrastructure to monitor those cameras, right? Like you were talking about a few minutes ago with the body cams.
Who operates your train stations, though? Is it Metra or does the city maintain?
Metra. The city does not.
Right.
I think the city
when they
owns
when they step off the train,
the station, but the Metra operates the trains.
Yeah, but so Metra's system is such that there are, because we dealt with this too. There are Metra stations that are maintained by Metra, even though they might be within your town, and then there are the ones that are maintained by the town themselves. So while Metra operates the train lines and everything, there are some stations that Metra maintains. So if that's the case, and I know you have 2 of them, you'd have to see if that's either the city maintains them, which then allow you to put cameras wherever you wanted, if that's where they wanted to go. Otherwise, you got to go through Metra for that to try to get those.
Let's just wave a magic wand, John. Would that help? Because it's either rotating the schedules of the cops on the train schedule to drop by to see who's getting let off in the town, or somebody's in a centralized point to have this data coming in that they can see. Here is a video of the train station, the inside of the train station. I think that would be a safety thing too, because you have people early in the morning, late at night going in there wanting to know what's going on. Would that help, aid, or no opinion?
I think, I found the cameras are only as effective if you're doing something with them. I mean, because people figure out after a while, if you just got a camera sitting up there and people are doing whatever they do and nobody responds or nobody does anything with it, well, then it's just another piece of hardware just sitting up there collecting dust. So I think Joe brought it up. I mean, you have to have people monitoring that. And then if there is something that's observed, people who will respond to it to take action on it. I mean, But I understand completely how it's a problem. I mean, especially at train stations, because that's where your commuters are going. That's where you get your visitors coming. You know, and it's tough when you're stepping over people, or people are coming up to you asking for money, and you know, and it can be daunting, especially for families, because you know, you don't know. I mean, it also speaks to the fact that for law enforcement, it's very difficult for us to most of these folks, and this is just my experience, they have a lot of issues, right? Whether it's drugs, whether it's alcohol, or mental health, or a combination thereof.
Yeah. Right.
And we're limited in where we can go with them, even if we get a legit reason to maybe take them somewhere. You know, that's an issue for us too. And trying to get these folks the help that they need is a really difficult prospect for us.
I mean, I think that in large measure, a lot of this is driven by people giving them money. One of the things that the city could do is put up a sign in prominent places where the beggars and the homeless are begging, to say, please don't give money to panhandlers. If you want to help the homeless, here is a homeless shelter, or here is a contact information that you were please give there, and not to cash to somebody on the street.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you too. On the other hand, I mean, we dealt with organized groups. I mean, these are organized people that appear to be destitute and are not destitute by any stretch of the imagination, and they will literally travel from town to town. I can tell you just from experience in Lincolnshire, we had 6 hotels, and they would rent out a block of rooms for a month, and then that's what they would do. They would just hit the streets, and interestingly, they wouldn't stay in Lincolnshire. They would hit the streets of Vernon Hills. They would hit the streets of Buffalo Grove, and then they'd come back. And I mean, you got to have a decent amount of money.
It's an enterprise. It's a business. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the guy outside of it's been well documented that the guy outside of Fresh Market, he's anything but homeless. He's got a home. He's got, you know, he's just basically a con artist.
And I can't understand why the city of Lake Forest doesn't put up a sign there.
So here's what I did some asking about that, not to take away John's our guest, but the issue is where would go, because Fresh Market and a lot of these. Fresh Market's a national company. I was at a Fresh Market in Florida recently when I was down in Naples. So there's Fresh Market's not just here in Lake Forest. A lot of these national companies, and I suspect that's the same issue you got with Bank of America with this guy sleeping in the drive-thru. They don't want the bad press.
Yeah,
you know, Starbucks
be the test.
Starbucks took some crap for kicking homeless people out of their bathrooms and stuff in downtown New York or San Francisco, or wherever it was.
Yeah.
So a lot of these national companies, they don't want
to be the test target. They don't want to make they're afraid of legal fees. Some municipalities,
but I think, but to finish the sentence,
take it up to the new Supreme Court.
Edit this all out. Getting back to the Fresh Market deal, the data point is that guy makes lewd comments to young women. Nobody reports it, yet they'll go to a city council meeting and say something about what happened. That's the problem. America,
if you don't document it didn't happen. That's the number one rule, right, John? I mean, if people don't file a police report, it never happened, right?
Right. But to Pete's point too about the data, I mean, you know, these companies, when customers quit coming, that'll also impact them, and a lot of times, unfortunately, that's what it takes for that kind of action.
Yeah,
but to Pete's point,
people stop giving them money.
Yeah, correct, exactly, but you know, when you start losing customers, when I'm going to go someplace else that I don't have to step over people or be accosted as I'm walking through the grocery store, I think that also makes it.
Yeah, there's a McDonald's near my office downtown that I won't go in anymore, because every time I go in, they've got homeless guys inside the McDonald's coming up to you when you're in line asking for money, and they don't do anything about it. So I'm done with that McDonald's. I'm sick. Right. I'm done with McDonald's anyways to try and lose weight. But that's but yeah, I mean, I just think
we got the shopping corrals at Jewel. Maybe we can find out who the manager is of this Fresh Market and just say, hey man,
Well, and Jewel has a similar problem, though, Pete. You've got a good relationship with the folks at Jewel now. I heard they have a homeless person outside of theirs, and
nice.
supposedly
the Fresh Market guy's got like the assistant beggar. The
assistant, supposedly
the guy has the assistant goes to the Jewel,
and supposedly the Jewel guy shoplifts from Jewel every morning. Now, I guess they just take the hit as Albertson's corporate, but
they will.
Maybe you can. Maybe you can go talk to them, but I think the city's looking at the signs. I've had some conversations with some people about putting signs up where they can.
I
gave them some samples of some signs, including the one from Scottsdale that you've shown, Rick.
Yeah.
So stay tuned on that. But let's talk a little bit about another issue that's happening downtown. Scooters, e-scooters, e-bikes, whatever you want to call them, are almost killing people. These kids are running amok in these things. I don't know if this is, Lincolnshire is a little bit different of a layout than Lake Forest, John. But did you ever have issues like this with kids on these things? I know this is kind of newer, and you retired a couple of years ago, but I think you've heard about what's going on here in Lake Forest, and it's probably happening in some other downtown areas. What's the police officer's take on that?
Well, the problem with them is that they're completely unregulated in the sense that how do you classify them as a vehicle, right? So, people are driving these things on sidewalks where you don't normally have motorized vehicles, right? That's usually reserved for roadways. And then they take them on the road too. So now you're obstructing traffic as well. I understand the concept of it is to allow people who may not have access to transportation immediately so that they can go from point A to point B. The problem is it does need to have some kind of regulation with it. I mean, you can't jump from the street. I can't take a motorcycle and jump it from the road to the sidewalk and think that that's okay. So I don't understand why a scooter is treated differently than say that. It's
marketing. I think it's marketing. If it has a motor, it cannot be on the sidewalk. If it has wheels, you walk it, you obey those little green signs, you walk it through town. Because we're talking about electric motors, guys. We're talking about zero torque, which means you can go from 0 to 20 immediately. So the response time for somebody to get out of the way, whether you're on the scooter or not, if you market it that way, that's simple. That's easy to ban, guys.
Yeah, and I think listening to some of the comments from the alderman at the last meeting, and they're gonna go into this at the next meeting. But Alderman Goshgarian was very vocal about saying basically what you just said, Pete. But let me ask you this, John. One of the challenges I think with ordinances like these is enforcement. How the cops got a lot on their plate. How does that work with, keeping people from robbing houses, keeping people from DUIs and all that stuff on the road, but also these kids on scooters in downtown Lake Forest? How does that work for if you're the police chief or one of the police officers?
Yeah, I mean, it's a combination of things. I think one that, we always like to start out with campaigns in terms of like trying to educate people, getting the word out, especially on social media platforms. You want to hit your target audience, which is a lot of those kids, as you're saying. That's the ones who are jumping typically on and off these things, and make sure that they understand, the safety aspects of it. And then, you got to follow that up also with the enforcement part of it. And a lot of times, selective targeting enforcement is found to be very, very effective. When we first came out with the law about cell phones, when it had to be hands-free. We did a lot of selective enforcement in Lincolnshire to basically, inform people about the new law and how that works. So for us, I think that's the way you approach that. You got to put that out there, put the message out there, give people some time to kind of digest it and understand what the regulations are or going to be. And then you got to hit them with enforcement action.
As you said earlier,
our regulations. I mean, as I understand it from the city council meeting that we last time, the state of Illinois does not classify these electric scooters at all. There's no definition for them at all.
Exactly. That's my point. Exactly.
And we need to talk to our Senator Morrison and Representative Morgan to help us out with that one. John, how does the
They're too busy helping the homeless move in.
It's not a good enough issue
actually,
for
John,
the election.
we got a couple more. John, I want to go back to the Safety Act if we could,
Sure.
Which is coming into effect on Monday under the Supreme Court's ruling. Other than what we've talked about, do you see any other problems with the new act?
Well, you guys mentioned body cams, and what's interesting is that there's a proviso within the Safety Act, which I find preposterous. But when it talks about body cams, it talks about that if an officer is involved in an incident, that they are not allowed to review the body cam footage prior to writing their report.
What?
A supervisor can review it, but and the language is such that it again, I can't even imagine a time when you wouldn't want to look at the body cam video.
Yeah.
Because the whole idea behind it is
Don't you want an accurate report?
Right. And having worked a number of officer-involved shootings, which were captured on body cam, in that moment, when you got that tunnel vision and you're fearing for your life and you're trying to protect yourself, there are times when, you may not be as accurate, even right after the event, especially a lot of times right after the event. And so I think you're really putting an officer in a terrible spot because, and just as an example, I remember one time the sheriff was involved in a shooting. One guy emptied his rifle, so he fired off like 8 to 10 rounds. He said he shot 2 shots, right? Well, upon review of the video and all that, clearly it was that. But if this guy had not been able to review his camera first, he would have put down it was 2 shots. Well, what happens then? Now you get the video, and who comes screaming but the defense saying, hey, this guy's a liar. This guy, and he was nothing of the sort. And so it seems ridiculous that we have this technology. We want officers to wear this at all times. There's also provisos in there that and they can't see it for something as monumentally as important as an officer-involved shooting. It just seems ridiculous. And it's almost like you're trying to set them up to fail, right?
And they're at a disadvantage because the public has their phones out recording them.
Sure,
right?
Of course. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And and again, those are little caveats that people don't even talk about. But that is a lot of why law enforcement is so upset about this, because it seems like, boy, this is a good time to really, take out our grievances on the cops, right? And this is where we're going to go after them, and we're doing it. And to what end? I don't know how that makes anybody safer. That proviso, explain that to me. That's where it's confusing. And
they won't take action unless it affects them. Okay, Lake Forest is starting to see it now. You got bum number 1, bum number 2, bum number. If we don't start adding these things up, okay, people won't care. So little things like the cams, all this stuff all adds up to public safety. So let's go down to priority. Okay, we got to get a new state's attorney that actually prosecutes the laws that we have. Number 2, we need the data that says this law is crap or it's good. And number 3, we need the data that says, hey, this is a problem or it's not a problem.
Well, I'll tell you,
we need people to care and vote.
On your number 2, what's going to happen is somebody is going to be arrested and immediately released at the police station because of the crime will be of the level that allows for that. They're going to immediately go back to the crime they started with and kill somebody. And that's when you're going to get some form of data. That's the problem. The data is going to be created at the price of a lot of innocent people. And that's we'll see if that actually.
And you're also letting people out that then commit more dangerous crimes. There was that cop. There was a Chicago police officer killed in a line of duty earlier this year, and I believe that one of the guys involved in killing him was out of jail for something else that really, if it hadn't been Kim Foxx as the state's attorney. If it had been Rich Daley, even, who's a Democrat, as the state's attorney, that guy would still be in jail and that police officer would still be alive today. So it's not even just the Safety Act. The Safety Act's bad. I think we've all established that. But it's also the judgment of these state's attorneys and how they handle it, right? I mean, I think the Will County state's attorney is going to be tougher with as much as he can be with the Safety Act than the Lake County state's attorney, Mr. Rinehart, because Mr. Rinehart seems to be more interested in the rights of the criminals than of the victims.
You're right, Joe, in that the state's attorney is the one who's going to make the decision of whether or not to ask for pretrial detention rather than pretrial release. For a lot of these offenses are what they're calling detainable. That is, the state's attorney has to prove by clear and convincing evidence that this defendant is likely to commit a crime if they are released prior to trial on the crime they're being charged with. And the state's attorney is going to have to make that decision. This is suddenly a whole new form of litigation that the state's attorney's office is going to have to make decisions about whether or not to request pretrial detention or not. And
I'd rather have Mary Cole making those decisions than Eric Rinehart, personally.
Me too. Yeah,
I'd rather have a judge look at it.
The judge looks at it. The judge only
judges in this
county. The attorney asks them to hear.
Correct.
Yeah. All right, let's bring some levity here, John.
All right.
Talk to me about the boys in red.
They just had a softball game yesterday.
The boys I can tell you they're excellent cooks. No doubt about that. They're fantastic.
Firehouse subs.
And I hear they know how to use a recliner pretty well.
Well, that you can't beat their Thanksgiving dinners. Their Sunday brunches are to die for. I'll tell you, those guys, man, they got it.
There was just a softball game between the Lake Forest Police and Lake Forest Fire. I saw on Facebook. I can't remember who won the game, but
those recliners.
I mean, look,
stuck on second base.
If my house is burning down, I want the best damn firemen you got out there coming to.
There isn't a foundation they haven't saved. I'll tell you right now, those guys are fantastic at that. So no question. I always say my big regret in life was not going to the other side there, because holy cow, everybody loves the firemen, right? They're great.
Yeah,
so
right.
And most of their calls are actually are not fires. They're medical calls, paramedic calls. So unfortunately, people do have medical issues, and there's car accidents and things like that, and you want the best trained and the best equipped to be there, because it does save lives. But
fortunately,
there is that little fun rivalry between the cops and firemen, and I think it's all in good fun, right? I mean, it's
absolutely. No, listen, they're great. I really enjoyed, like you said, they obviously respond to a lot of other things other than fires, but when we did have the occasional house fire and stuff, boy, I tell you what, I always admired those guys, and they're one thing that they had, which I always thought was great and admired them for, which I wish we had more of in law enforcement, is their training and the way that they can bring. You can have a fire department, because obviously a lot of times they bring multiple agencies in, right? And they're lockstep with each other. It's amazing to watch. Doesn't matter if it's Lake Forest, Lincolnshire, Deerfield, Bannockburn, man, when they all come together, they know exactly what to do. And
they zone out everything. They do. But you did kind of that with the Major Crimes Task Force, because obviously, if there's a big crime in Lake Forest,
right?
The Lake Forest PD, you guys all help each other, right, with stuff like that. I mean,
think about the 4th of July parade last year.
Oh, the Highland Park thing, absolutely.
Yeah, there's definitely mutual aid between law enforcement agencies. The difference, though, is that, just take something like radios. It's better, but we used to be on completely different frequencies. I had no idea what would be going on in Lake Forest. I'd get to Lake Forest, and I'd have to have somebody relaying to me. We also train differently, to be honest. I mean, we don't universally train the way firefighters do. So my tactics might be a little different than your tactics. And I think that, but that's, like I said, it's getting better for the police, and we are doing way more collaborative efforts, which is great because it benefits everyone. But that's one thing that we've definitely taken away from firefighters.
And with mental health training, mental health is a big thing. And, a lot of people think that some of the crazy stuff that's happening is because there's been an overall decline in mental health in this country, and the pandemic kind of put a big spotlight on that or gaslit it. Yeah. Now, Lake Forest Police have a full-time social worker, and that social worker is dealing with this homeless guy by Hometown Coffee, but they also deal with a lot of stuff, a lot of domestic issues. Where is it, we keep hearing about that at some point it's not a police officer, it's a social worker or a mental health professional that needs to deal with things. How does that fall into the day-to-day of what the police department needs to do?
Yeah, I think so. There's definitely a good combination you can find there. But one thing I will say is that I don't think it's a good idea to send social workers out initially on almost anything, because you don't know where things will go, and you need trained people to deal with people in crisis. And that is the police, because sometimes, things can go from bad to worse in an instant. And I don't want to put a social worker in that situation. I do think that they definitely have a role in today's law enforcement. And a lot of that, which I love, is the follow-up part, because one thing that we were lacking in law enforcement is, our job is to get there, assess the situation, make decisions, and then move on, right? Because that's what we have to do. We got to get to the next call. Somebody else needs us. Whereas social workers have that time and that ability to do the follow-up. So especially like in domestic or child abuse situations where, boy, we would love to follow up with that family, but as law enforcement, we just don't have the opportunity. But now somebody in that role, the social work role, I think is a really, really vital person, because what it hopefully does is not have to cause us to come back out there again and have to keep dealing with this and have to keep dealing.
But John, don't some communities out there have a four-legged call where you have a copper and a mental, whatever you want to call them, to aid? And it's kind of it's a screwy situation. Thank God we have you guys out there. But you got somebody that's on meth. What are you going to say to them? They can do anything, right? So have you heard?
No, that's exactly my point.
Hey, let's send a social worker out there while this guy's got a machete.
Well, unfortunately, I think there have been some areas of the country that have tried that and found that doesn't work. And again, as we talked about, when police respond, it's usually because people are in a crisis situation, whatever that might be. And it's usually in their worst moments, at the worst times of their lives. And again, I'm not saying there's not a place. As I just said, there's definitely a place for these folks, for counselors, that kind of stuff. But in the moment, I'm not sure that that's the place for them. Because
the police must feel at this point that we're just under siege with all these different changes, including, I was driving past on Lincoln Avenue in Chicago on my way to the Cubs game last week, and we went past a police station on Lincoln. It was jammed in front with kids, toys, women, and children hanging around, because all the migrants are now living in the police stations in Chicago. Right. It did not look like a police station. It looked like a daycare center. I mean, it was people all over the place, all moms and little kids who had walked from Venezuela and then got on the bus and came to Chicago. And where does Chicago park them? At the police station.
Soon to be Lake Forest.
Talk about a slap in the face to the police by a mayor. I mean, you talk to any Chicago police officer, ask them what they think of Brandon Johnson, you're not going to get any positive comments back. And that's why I think going back to that mayoral election, every police officer I've talked to in town is very glad that Randy Tack was elected. Randy has family members that are police officers. He clearly gets it when it comes to law enforcement, and he's not going to be writing checks to Kim Fox or to Eric Rinehart or any of these woke prosecutors. But and my experience as back in the day as an elected official, and this was long before the crap that's going on now. This is in late 90s, early 2000s. I did ride-alongs with our local police, and even back then, the thing that I came to appreciate working with them was they, at any moment in their job, their life's in danger. A simple traffic stop. The Lake Forest Police could pull somebody over on 41 or Waukegan who's speeding one night, and most of the time it's here's your ticket, or it's a DUI, take the breathalyzer, let's go. But you don't know what's behind that windshield when you're walking up to that car. And unfortunately, in other cities, they've lost, including Chicago, they've lost police officers because of that. I mean, it's tough. I mean, you have to prepare yourself every morning. I mean, what's it like, to think that, hey, I may go to work today and not come home?
Yeah, I can tell you. So, since I retired, I teach peer support to first responders, primarily law enforcement, but we do have telecommunicators in there as well. And it's something that's sorely needed for especially law enforcement. So it's not just that aspect of it, the kind of fear that you sometimes live with, but it's obviously, I've experienced more trauma than most people are going to experience in a lifetime. I've experienced in a year, especially being on the task force and stuff. And that idea that, I mean, but one thing that is, you rely on your training. And if you're going to do this and seriously do this job, you do it because you love it and you want to serve the community, and you're willing to lay down your life for them. And it is, and I think you said it earlier, Joe, it's a kinship unlike any other. And it really is. And part of why we're really big on peer support training for officers is because, let me tell you, cops don't want to talk to people who aren't cops a lot of times, right? Yeah. And it's just, it is one of those things. Look, I couldn't come home to my wife, who's a wonderful supporting person, but tell her, man, I had the shit scared out of me today. I had to draw my gun, and I wasn't sure, if I was going to make it or not. And, because now that's overburdensome for her, but you see what I mean? But we need that outlet as well. But there, like I said, most of the people get into this for the right reasons, and they would all do it. And I can speak just for the officers that I know, just all of them would have done it in a heartbeat. And what's also amazing about it is that personal differences aside, right? Because, you're like a family. I mean, I'm 55. I spent 25 years of my life at Lincolnshire, right? So think about that. I mean, that's a lifetime that I spent, and a lot of it with the same people. And, like a family, you don't always get along. But I'll tell you what, man, when it came down to if my brother or my sister were in trouble, didn't matter if we fought that morning. I was going to town, right? And same thing. And we all love the community, and that's what we would do. So it's a mindset, but we're human beings too. So, we still go home. We still have families that we have to take care of. So,
John, we're running a little bit late. If you got to split, I mean, I want to keep going with you, man, because this is important stuff. But we talked about the mental health on the other side. Let's talk about the mental health on your side. Out of 10 coppers, how many think got PTSD, where you're recurring that moment over and over and over? And then how many of the coppers are able to do something about it? Because there's a stigma with mental health, right? Yep. You have this going on. If you go try to do something about it, it's like you're weak. Is any of that going on that you've seen?
So we've been lucky when we do our trainings. We've been trying to go all over the state, right? And what you'll see is very interesting. There's a clear demarcation in terms of like our area where it's I think we've got some really good chiefs in place that are really focused on the mental health well-being of their officers. And then as you kind of move around the state in some of these smaller, more rural areas, it's still that old mindset of, you shouldn't need that. You got to toughen up. And I think what we forget too is with a different generation that we have now, we have to take that into account, that when you have folks that have kind of lived sheltered lives, right? I mean, they had a great upbringing. They went to college. Their first job is in law enforcement. They could go on a bad accident, right? They've never seen an accident in their life. And all of a sudden, there's a child laying in the street and somebody is dead. Or it could be the first time they've ever seen somebody dead. They never even experienced death, right? Yep. They're like 22 years old, never seen it before. And that's the first time they see something like that. That has an effect on them. And so that's the kind of stuff, major events for sure, but even stuff like that where we're trying to educate departments and saying, hey, you got to take that kid aside and you have to work with them, because that is a traumatic event. It's amazing. I asked people to raise their hands in class. This is the first time you saw a dead body. And you'll see people, half the class will be like, it was on the job. I'd never seen it before. I didn't even know what to do. So
Sure.
it is so important for us. We have to treat it just like we do our physical well-being. We're all good about working out and doing that stuff, but boy, oh boy, and one thing that I was on the task force when I was able to get promoted, it was a rudimentary peer support at the time, but I can't stress enough. And we've been finally getting people vetted through a program to make sure that the therapists understand the culture of the law enforcement community. Because I'll tell you right now, you cannot go to a regular therapist and start spewing the kinds of things that we see, because again, they're not used to dealing with that. But there are great people out there, counselors and therapists who work specifically with law enforcement, which have done wonders. Because unfortunately our suicide rate too is astronomical in our profession. And I will say, unfortunately, and I know a lot of Chicago coppers, and too, unfortunately, they're of the mind that they've still got that old stigma, and that's a shame. Because if any department needs it, it's that department.
Those
therapists are the bartender.
Really in the front line. Yeah,
therapists can't be the bartender.
A lot of times you're right.
Bar, yeah.
No,
Shout out to Mike's Cop Bar.
I get it. Yeah.
You know who you are, John.
I've been to Mike's Cop Bar.
You shouldn't have.
I was brought in by a police officer friend. I told you I got friends who were cops. Many
John,
years
do we
ago.
leave it? Do we leave anything on the table, man? You think you got it? You got your side out?
No, this is great. I really appreciate the opportunity to give my side of the story, so to speak. But this has been wonderful.
We really appreciate it, John. Thank you very much for being on with us this morning.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you for your service.
Yes.
Right. No, absolutely. And tell those boys in red, if they get off the recliners, we'll have them come on the show too, Mike Yellow.
I don't know. How about a chili cook-off? Come on.
Yeah, there you go. That'll get them out.
Fire-ass chili.
All right.
The Lake Forest Podcast is supported by viewers, listeners, and businesses just like you. Looking for the best pool supplies? Look no further than Dohany's Pool Supplies. With a history dating back to 1967, this family-owned business offers everything families need to keep their pools clean and sparkling, from chemicals to equipment. Plus, customers enjoy free shipping on all orders. Visit Dohany's Pool Supplies today at doheny.com, DOHENY.com, to learn more. Forest Bluff Real Estate Team serves Illinois, Wisconsin, Lake Forest, and Lake Bluff. John Josephitis, Laura Lee Van Fleet, and of course Michelle Parnell. Get a free market analysis now at forestbluffrealestate.com. For the best cannabis in the world, look no further than Iliad Epic Grow. Owned by Lake Bluff's own Rich Ruzich, they are a cannabis cultivation center focusing on hard-to-find small batch products that will delight both the occasional user and ganjier. When visiting Michigan, ask for it by name. Epic Products, exceptional process. For more information, email info@iliadgrow.com. Havey Communications has been helping first responders arrive safely since 1983. It's owned by Lake Forest's own Mike Havey. Check them out at haveycommunications.com. Are you looking for beer, wings, and swings in Lake Forest? Well, check out Duffer's Pub and their state-of-the-art golf simulators. This primo setup is the perfect place for your next corporate event. Yes, let your boss win. And of course, all the games will be on the TV, and you'll never go hungry because the za and wings are scrumptious. Go to Duffer's Pub on Western Avenue now. We'd also like to say we're thankful for our Patreon supporters, Otto, John C., Helen, and Herrick.